What's up, guys? Welcome to this weekly Wednesday Live. Today I want to continue my discussion about strength training for musicians. So if you guys missed it, yesterday my new blog post was basically arguing that musicians should be doing strength training on a regular basis. I talked about some of the misconceptions. I used to hear all the time when I was a musician that strength training was bad for musicians, and I go over some of the reasons why that's just not true. And then I talk about some of the other benefits. I share a little bit about my story, which I'm also going to do today. But today I want to take it a slightly different direction, and I want to talk more specifics. If I've convinced you via the blog post, or maybe you're already convinced that strength training is beneficial to your playing, what are you supposed to do now? Like, what are the best practices when you go to the weight room? I'm going to go over all that in a little bit. But just in case you missed the blog post, or in case you don't really know a little bit about my background, I just want to talk about why this is important to me. So before I was a full-time trainer, I was a classical musician. I played trombone. I was studying to be an orchestral trombonist. I was really in the classical music world. I was a music major in school. I traveled in the summers. I was constantly trying to work towards this goal. So I can definitely relate to all of the rigor and the discipline and the frustrations and the challenges that go along with trying to make it in the classical music world. Now, I also, so when I was first in music, so in my earlier days, like in high school and in my first year of college, that was a period of time when I was really overweight and I wasn't exercising. I was super weak, and I started to have some issues with my playing that were a result of my lack of physical fitness. So the first thing that happened was I upgraded to an Edwards. So trombone players that are watching this will know it was a little bit heavier than the con that I was playing, and I started to have a lot of like tennis elbow issues and shoulder issues because the horn was heavier and it just hurt me to hold my instrument. And I know a lot of string players especially can relate to this, but a lot of people deal with like tendonitis and overuse issues like that. Another thing that was happening to me was when I was sitting in long rehearsals, I would start to get this really terrible lower back pain, and it was really difficult to play. It was difficult to breathe properly to play my instrument. So that was pretty frustrating and difficult to deal with. And then I started having other issues as well. Like when I got to college, I was having a really hard time staying awake during the day. Now, I wasn't staying up super late. I felt like I was getting a decent amount of sleep, but the sleep that I was getting wasn't enough. And by the time the afternoon came around, I was falling asleep in my classes. I was falling asleep in rehearsal. I wasn't able to focus in my practice sessions. Of course, none of this was very productive to me becoming a better trombone player. So I was having all of these issues, physical issues that were getting in the way of my playing. Now, this is not when I started to get in shape, but once I did start to get in shape, all of these issues started to go away. So first of all, my back pain went away when I was sitting in rehearsals. I stopped having the elbow issue because I just developed a much stronger upper body. I had significantly more energy during the day. I was able to focus in rehearsals. I was able to have more productive practice. All of this stuff started to improve after I started lifting weights, after I started losing weight and getting my health in order. So I think that as musicians, we get really caught up in the mental aspect of what we're doing, which of course is the most important thing, but we often forget that we need healthy and functioning bodies to properly perform our instruments. Even if I won't even say that. All instruments are inherently physical. There is always some sort of physical element that goes into your playing, whether it's having good posture so that you can breathe, or having good control so that you can execute fine technical movements. And if you're neglecting your body, if you're weak especially, you're just setting yourself up for a host of issues down the road. So I really think that adding in strength training, getting stronger, doing some targeted mobility work to counteract a lot of the repetitive movements that you do every day as a musician, I think that really goes a long way. And I think that if you add some of this into your routine in a smart way, which I'm going to talk about next, you'll notice some benefits to your playing. Okay, so strength training is super important for musicians, but what should you actually do? Even if you're not a musician and you're trying to get started in strength training, there's just so much conflicting information and it can be really confusing. What are the best ways to go about adding this to your routine? So the number one thing that I recommend, especially if you're just getting started, but even if you've been lifting for a while, is just to keep it simple. You don't need a lot of fancy bells and whistles to get stronger in a way that's going to benefit your playing and just help you feel good from day to day. I would focus most of your workouts on big compound movements that fall into a few main categories. So we're going to do some squatting, we're going to do some hip hinging, which would be like deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, kettlebell swings, pull-throughs, that kind of thing. we're gonna do some upper body pressing. We're gonna be a little cautious about this for musicians. I'm gonna talk about that in a minute. And we're gonna do lots and lots of upper body pulling, lots of rows. We wanna really try to build a strong back to help us support our instrument well as we're playing. So the bulk of your training should consist of these big movements, big exercises where you're using lots of different muscles and joints. We always want to use really good form. So sometimes people will say that strength training can make you bulky, you don't move as well, and a lot of that just comes down to people performing exercises incorrectly or using inappropriate loading methods. So we always want to use a full range of motion to the best of our ability. And we always want to make sure that whatever we're performing, we're pretty comfortable executing good form. We don't want to put ourselves in a bad position where we might get hurt or anything like that. So when in doubt, keep it simple, do exercises that you're comfortable with, and just focus on progressing those. That takes me into my next thing, which is that when you're lifting weights, we always want to be focusing on what's called progressive overload. So basically, every time you go to the gym or from week to week when you repeat a workout, you're always trying to improve yourself in some way. Now, we're all busy people. Musicians especially are busy because you could always be practicing or always be listening. It just never ends. So we really want to make the most of our training time. And if week after week after week you're just doing the same exact things and you're never trying to progress, it's kind of ultimately not going to get you where you want to go. So try to add some weight every week. Try to add some reps. Try to use better form or take less rest. But every time you go to the gym, try to be improving yourself a little bit. That's how you're going to see those strength gains and improve your movement and all of that good stuff. And then the last thing that we really want to focus on is having a good mobility routine in place with our training. Now, sometimes this can go overboard. I don't recommend going to the gym and spending your entire time foam rolling and doing corrective exercises because it's boring and it's honestly not the best use of your time. But before you go to the gym, make sure you're doing some sort of dynamic warm-up where you're warming up your hips. Especially for musicians, you're warming up your spine and your upper back and shoulders. Those are areas that tend to get really tight and maybe have some issues related to playing. So do that before you exercise. And then if you wake up in the morning and you feel really stiff or you're trying to get in a morning practice session and things just aren't feeling good, add in some of those drills again. The more that you can grease those movements, the better you're going to feel. Now, one other note is that musicians might want to consider adding in some cars, which is basically a drill to teach you to really use a full range of motion, particularly in the shoulders and hips is where I use them. I'll link to something that tells you how to do this, but if you feel like you are really, really restricted in your shoulders or really restricted in your hips from lots of sitting, these are good to sprinkle in throughout your training session or first thing in the morning, and they can help you kind of open up a little bit and have more control over your body. Okay, so now that we've talked about like the simple building blocks of a workout, here's what I think that musicians should especially prioritize in their training. Number one is core strength. So core strength is at the base of good posture, and good posture is essential for any musical performance, no matter if it's a wind instrument for good breathing or a string instrument or a vocalist. We need to be able to support ourselves, and often we need to support ourselves for like a long period of time through a performance or a rehearsal. As soon as things start to cave in, then you're just not able to produce good sound or good technical output. So the core training that I recommend is called anti-movement training. So I'm not talking about going to the gym and doing 100 sit-ups. I'm talking about doing things like planks and dead bugs and pail-off presses, some sort of core exercise where the main portion of your core is nice and stable, everything's engaged, and you're moving in some other way. Maybe you're moving your arm or you're moving your leg. This is the kind of training that's going to allow you to keep the main part of your body nice and stable as you're playing your instrument or moving your arms or doing something like that. So I'll put a link in the comments. I wrote an article about this, but when you're doing your core training, don't get caught up in a lot of the fancy like trendy core exercises or sit-ups or crunches. Make sure you're doing a lot of really basic stuff where your core is not moving and you're really focusing on firing all those muscles. The other big priority, which I already mentioned, is building a strong back. So most instruments are held in the front of the body or held over the shoulder in some way, and you need a strong back in order to stay upright as you're doing this and not rounding forward. And when we start to round forward a lot, that's when we start to get some issues in the shoulders sometimes. So what I recommend doing is lots and lots of horizontal pulling, so all different kinds of rows, inverted rows, dumbbell rows, machine rows. And then I also recommend targeting a little bit in the upper back actually. So doing exercises like face pulls, where you are trying to extend and pull your shoulder blades together a little bit higher. Those will have a big payoff as well. So prioritizing core strength and back strength would be like the two biggest things that I would recommend. I don't necessarily recommend a ton of vertical pulling, like pull-ups, chin-ups, unless you have good, you don't have any issues with your shoulders. So first and foremost, prioritize that horizontal pulling. I think that's going to be a little better to start. So continuing on with that, a few things that you might want to be cautious of when you're a musician, you're getting into strength training. And this is especially true if you have like tendonitis or you have some issues. If you don't have any issues, then you can, do whatever you want, but just be always smart in looking out for pain and stuff like that. I don't necessarily recommend a ton of isolation exercises if you have these issues. So isolation exercises would be like shoulder raises or curls or tricep press downs. If you don't have any pain when you're doing these and they feel good, that's fine. But a lot of times you're just doing a lot of extra work for these joints that are already a little agitated. So be cautious about adding that stuff in and do it at the end of your workout. Make sure it's not the bulk of your workout. Anything that you're doing, especially when you're doing all this back training that I recommended, you really want to watch out for shoulders shrugging. So this is something I see with all of my clients, most of whom work at a desk, but it's especially prevalent with musicians. Everyone tends to hold a lot of tension in their upper back here. So if you notice that you're doing this, just take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and continue on with the exercise. And you may have to do that like 50 times in a workout when you're starting out, but it's important to start to notice that you're shrugging and to just correct it. And then the last thing is to be cautious about pressing exercises. So pressing exercises, people have a lot of bad form issues just in general that can be problematic, and it's especially true again if you've got like tendonitis or you have a cranky shoulder or something like that. So first of all, you might not want to do a lot of overhead pressing. A lot of people just aren't built well for overhead pressing in general, and is especially true again if you have some shoulder issues. So if you want to do some like overhead work, you could try pressing with a landmine. That's going to get you reaching a little bit, and you're going to be pressing like at an angle, so you get some of the overhead benefit, but you don't have to go all the way overhead. When you're doing bench press stuff, so with bar, with dumbbells, you always want to pack your shoulders, which means that you're going to first of all unshrug your shoulders, and then you're going to pull your shoulder blades together behind your back, and you're going to hold them there throughout the set, and that's going to keep your shoulder in a good place. And then all the other pressing stuff that you do, like push-ups, and again I said landmine pressing, you always want to focus on reaching your arms as far away from you as you can at the top. And again, this is just going to ensure that everything's moving smoothly in the shoulder. So just keep an eye on those types of things when you're training them. Okay, so just in general, if you want to improve your playing with exercise, strength training is really important. It's also important to have a good, well-rounded fitness routine in general. So I recommend at least a couple days of strength training a week. 2 to 3 might be totally sufficient if you're busy and you're already doing other things. Definitely should be doing some sort of regular cardio. I definitely recommend prioritizing sleep, especially as you start to add in more activity. You want to make sure you're recovering well from that. And then just eating well and taking care of yourself. It's so easy to get really caught up in improving your performance and being super busy, but if you don't take care of your physical body, your playing will suffer. Doesn't mean you have to be in like Super Bowl shape or be super ripped or anything. That's not important, but you want to make sure that you're feeling good and you're moving well to help you play your best. So just to summarize, so these are the things I think you should focus on in the weight room as a musician. So first of all, keep it simple. Most of your workouts should be big compound movements, squats, hip hinges, presses, lots of pulling. Make sure you're always using good form and a full range of motion, and definitely include a dynamic warm-up. Make sure you're doing some drills just to get things moving properly before you jump right into your workout. And then we're always trying to progress from week to week, however that is for you. Even if you can't add weight, you're adding reps or taking less rest, that kind of thing. We're focusing a lot on core strength and back strength, and we're being cautious with a lot of extra work on isolation movements, shrugging as we're doing things in the gym, and then when we're pressing, we always want to make sure that the pressing feels good and that we're using good form. And if you don't know what that is, please reach out to me. I'm happy to direct you to some videos or information about that. But I hope this was helpful for you guys. I know that when I started lifting weights and getting stronger, I noticed so many benefits to my playing. And I've been hearing similar from other people. So if you have more specific questions, or you're still not convinced, or you have maybe a unique situation, you want some help with it, please shoot me a direct message. I'm happy to help. And share this with any other musicians that you think would benefit. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching.